Batman Full Moon issue 4, Rodney Barnes writing with STEVAN Subic, whatever, on art. Apologies for the pronunciation. So yeah, this is wrapping up this werewolf story, this Black Label book, and it very much follows Bruce and Zatanna going to find Talbot in Romania, where he's went to try and sort of figure out some answers. And it's basically told by a fortune teller that, hey, like, no, like there's no reversing this. You are what you are. And he kind of like relates it back to his time in the military, because she says, "Are you sure you weren't already a monster? I mean, you killed people." And he's like, "Yeah, but I was a soldier. It was duty. It was, for country, blah, blah, blah." And I love the art on the pages where you it must be a little bit later in the page that I'm thinking of, but there's the page where you actually see him as a soldier looking up at the wolf the night he must have got bit. Really love that page. And generally speaking, the art, like, especially when, like, Bruce and him both transform and we get the wolf fight again later on, all of those pages are just, they're haunting, they're beautiful, they're kind of grisly. Werewolves are at their best when they're kept somewhat in the shadows, because it just makes them feel larger and more imposing and scarier.
And that whole sequence of it taking out his regiment, right, of the soldiers, and just it is playing in the shadows, and it feels visceral while not showing too much. I mean, outside of the decapitation that we get on that, the fourth panel down, right? Everything feels like it's happening off page, but it's still very visceral. And then it gets to that spot that you're talking about where it's looking down at him. And
the moonlight just kind of like, lights up the rim around him, but he's otherwise in darkness. It's really beautiful hunting stuff. And then obviously, like, Bruce and Zatanna, looking for him and not really being sure, like, how successful this will be. And they just kind of run into him at a certain point. But the one thing we do kind of find out, because Zatanna goes to the fortune teller, and it turns out there is a solution. Like, the one thing that can save someone and turn them back to being a human. And this is something that comes from some Wolfman or werewolf stories. Not every story has this rule. But here they go with the idea that if the wolf that sired the other wolf dies, then that'll fix the person they turned. So Bruce will be human again if this. Now Bruce doesn't know that, and of course he wouldn't be willing to kill anyone. But Zatanna actually, comes out and stabs him with a dagger, to save him. So yeah, but we just get like several pages of this. The transformations are good. Like, I love the moment where they're just starting to transform, and Bruce like turns to Zatanna and says, "Run." Just really good stuff.
It reminds me of Monster Squad. And I know it's going to sound ridiculous, but in the scene where they call the kid's dad, where the werewolf, and he's like, he's going to kill your son as he's transforming. It reminded me of that.
I don't remember anything being quite as haunting in that movie, because it's more of a kid's adventure thing, but because that page where they've both turned and Zatanna's in the middle, and they're howling at each other, that stuff's great. Like, just all these pages are just gorgeous. It's just a showpiece for the artist here more than anything. But it makes it fun. It makes it, it feels violent. It feels brutal. Everything about it's just super entertaining. Man-Bat's like trying to work on something to slow down the spread, but by the time Constantine shows up with this potential cure, the deed is already done, and Zatanna has and I love that, even that page of Zatanna, because Bruce is getting beat, like, because this is the other part of this story, is that basically Talbot basically accepts what he is, and he's like, you know what, I'm a monster, I'm just going to be a monster now, I'm not going to care, I'm just going to like give in to my wolf side. So he kind of becomes the villainous werewolf effect, because he's been sympathetic up until this issue, really. And the page where Zatanna stabs him, she's like only halfway out of her portal, so it's like a really cool page. But Bruce, like the Batman werewolf, is lying in the foreground, bloody, like he's about to get killed. Like he's ready about to die. Done.
Yeah, he ain't getting up at the 9 count.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of this is this kind of acceptance that he did need help, that Batman's valuable, and he kind of admits that later. There's also kind of a running thing where both Constantine and Jim Gordon at different parts of the story are like, why did that wolf going through the city have a Batman like outfit on? And Constantine especially is like asking Bruce this at the end, and he's clearly hinting like, hey, so Bruce Wayne was the werewolf, and we saw Bruce Wayne in a Batman outfit. What's up with that, Bruce? And he's like, I have no idea. But obviously Constantine's totally put two and two together and is prodding him. So yeah, it ends with him and Zatanna kissing, all happy, and they're helping out down at that church that the wolves wrecked when they had their big fight last issue. So, you know, it's just this sweet thing of like, yeah, he does do charity work. He will go down and help them, and you know, make sure. I think, you know, in the middle there's a scene where Alfred's like paying all the medical bills for the woman who got her arm ripped off. So
Yeah.
you know,
And she also shows compassion because she's not upset for helping, right? Like, yeah, she got her arm ripped off, but for her, it was worth it to try to help this guy find salvation, and right. So I did like that scene in this too, because it really dips into the werewolf as tragic figures.
yeah.
Part of the mythos, because they're, you know, Man-Bat and Constantine do find a cure, but it's too late by the time they get there, right? As Zatanna does have to stab him with the silver knife to save Bruce, you know, so we just miss it by a little bit, and it adds that tragedy to it.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that one of the like the teens or whoever was with the Hundred Woman kind of criticizes Alfred and says, "Hey, maybe more important than the money would be if Mr. Wayne could actually like come down and like show his face and be a presence and help. It's not just about throwing money at things." And that's also what the ending kind of plays off, is that he is down there, he's handing out shirts or whatever it is, and you know, actually being there and being a presence. So you know, it's a nice ending. But I mean, this book has been good for the art and all how good the wolves look and the werewolves, like the horror sequences and the fighting between the wolves. And this issue gave you tons of that, right? It's like it's arguably got a little bit less intrigue than some of the other issues because we've already kind of like answered everything by this point. But it was a solid conclusion. It did not like hold back on the wolf fighting, and you know, it gave you like a, you know, Batman had to accept that he needed help for this, so he gets his little arc complete, and yeah, it was a good time.
I will say the art does kind of suffer the more the sunlight that it is, right?
Oh yeah,
so those last couple pages aren't nearly as good.
Yeah, nighttime stuff, absolutely phenomenal, perfect. Yeah. Daytime stuff, okay, a little bit, you know, wonky, but it's fine, you know. Like, you know.
Was it Subic that did those fill-ins on Penguin when it got into Penguin's origin? Because some of these were making me feel very reminiscent of that.
I can't remember.
I'm gonna look right now. Then
I cannot remember, but
some of the faces it was reminding me of.
I could see it. I could see that being Subic. I think that if you've been liking this book, I can't imagine you're mad at what this issue did, unless you were expecting some big like twist ending or something. Like, I can't see why you would be upset at this. Obviously, they weren't going to leave Batman as a werewolf, so I mean, admittedly, it's a Black Label book, so they could have done, I suppose, but that wasn't the direction they went in. It was just like a fun werewolf movie with Batman as the lead character, and they delivered. So had a good time.
No Subic on Penguin. At least it doesn't come up on League of Comic Geeks. So very reminiscent of that. But you know, ultimately, like, it is someone that does like werewolf stories. You know, I was wondering if, because ultimately it's a superhero story, are we going to lean into the tragedy of it, or are we going to have the happy day where Batman does save the day because, you know, Langstrom and Constantine were able to find this cure. So I do like that they did the more tragic thing. And I think it does make it feel more like a horror book. And
there's a comparison to the idea of the night the Waynes died being like when he was like bit by his werewolf, where that's where he became Batman effectively, and how he's been able to sort of maintain that, like, and you know, like still be a human being, you know, like, whereas this guy tragically in the end of the story gives in to just being a wolf, whereas, you know, Batman never just gives in to being like, okay, I'm just going to go full, like, you know, vigilante and start killing people or anything like that. There's like a level of control that Batman has that.
Right, but there's still that dichotomy of embracing that what made you, right? The trauma there, right? That Bruce has to accept the fact, right? That he doesn't want any of that to happen to anybody else, right? That's the source of Batman. So I do like that Talbot takes it in the opposite way, that he's just going to be the monster and create more, you know, chaos and whatever. It was a nice, you know, flip-flop.
All right, what are you giving Batman Full Moon?
I'm gonna use an 8.
Yeah, I agree with that. Art's gorgeous. Really easy. Despite the fact that it was like 40 pages or whatever it was a really nice, brisk read.